Something's going way... Oh, wait a sec. There we go. This is Army P from eXplorminate.net, and this is TLDR, Stars and Shadows. We have a review out for Stars and Shadows right now on eXplorminate.net. It was done by Chris Sergeant Shaggy Massey, and he did an awesome job detailing the entire game from top to bottom, left to right. He really dug into it and let you guys know everything you're going to need to know if you want to purchase this game. All the highs, a few of the lows, but mostly why it's so much fun. I wanted to use this opportunity to tell you guys all what I think of Stars and Shadows, and I can easily recommend it. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking to you about why I think Stars and Shadow is a great game. And it has to do with the scope, the kind of roadmap that the developer lays out for you, the consumer, about how their game is going to come together and what the end product is going to be. There's no better place to start than right at the beginning. When Ashtar Games decided that they were going to make Stars and Shadows, they clearly had a roadmap of how they wanted the game to look and feel, and that's off of very early 90s 4X games. Games like Master of Orion. Now, one of the things I really dislike when it comes to indie developers making games that were based off of Master of Orion is that our expectations get so unbelievably high when someone decides that they're going to make a clone of one of the most classic 4X games like Master of Orion 1 or 2. And that's where Stars and Shadows deviates. It never comes out and says it's going to be a Master of Orion clone. It just says it's going to be heavily inspired by games from the late 90s. And I think that's a fair assessment. There are a lot of things in Stars and Shadows that you can clearly tell are inspired by games that came out in that period. The graphics are very sprite-based, colorful, they're all 2D. The format, the user interface is all very familiar to us if we've ever played any game from that era. The combat is tactical. It shares a lot of similarities with Master of Orion series, but it decides to make its own path. And one of the things I think is unfair is if you judge this game against Master of Orion, because I don't think you'll ever be able to meet that expectation. Oftentimes our nostalgia puts rose-tinted glasses on and we look back on a game as if it was the most perfect example of 4X space games there ever was or ever will be. Stars and Shadows stands on its own, and I really hope that if you're reading the review or you're watching this video that you can understand that this game is excellent. It stands on its own. It's inspired heavily by games of that era, but it is no means a Master of Orion clone. Now that I got that out of my system, we can talk a little bit more about scope. Now, right from the beginning, you could tell that the developers wanted this game to be focused around two areas of 4X, and that is shipbuilding and turn-based tactical combat. And in these two areas, the developers did a great job. The shipbuilding in particular is fun, it's interesting. There's lots of different modules that you can research, upgrade. You can customize each ship with attack, utility, and defense. It really is a treat because you can customize each ship and your fleet to do a specific job that really pays dividends to your tactical combat later on in the game. And this is very important to the success of any game that decides they're going to put more of a focus on one area over another in a 4X game. In Stars and Shadows case in particular, they had to make sure that they nailed it right out of the park when it came to shipbuilding and, of course, tactical combat. Now, if these were to have fallen short, I don't think we'd be having this lovely little video or having a discussion about it. The bottom dollar is that the tactical combat in the game is fun. It's nostalgic, and it's got a deep core to it. There's a lot of different mechanics at play that you can utilize and exploit when going to war against enemy empires. And it ties into the shipbuilding aspect so well. You can upload a ton of different missile systems onto your ships only to find out the enemy empire that you're fighting against has great point defense. So you may have to switch to lasers or railguns. You're going to have to eventually conquer different planets, which means that you're going to have some type of weapon system to take down a planetary defense. So you're going to have to consider that while building some of your ships. Or maybe you're going to build a ship that's designed specifically to take down planet defenses, but it might be terribly vulnerable to, let's say, smaller ships or ship-to-ship combat. All this ties in really well, and it had to, because the other aspects of Stars and Shadow aren't nearly as deep as its space combat and its shipbuilding aspects. Colony management, for the most part, is very streamlined, although it's not a bad system. It's just not nearly as deep or engaging as the space combat aspect of the game. So if you're going to make light on colony management and diplomacy, you have to make sure that your combat and your shipbuilding is spot on. From day one, Ashtar Game, the developer of Stars and Shadows, knew exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a shipbuilding and combat heavy 4X game that was light on diplomacy and light on colony management. And what they decided to do was they maintained that scope all the way through, knowing full well they were going to have to do exceedingly well in one aspect of the game, knowing the other side was a little bit light. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Ashtar Games, and I really appreciate when I'm playing Stars and Shadows, is you can tell that they put a lot of effort to make sure that that one area of the game is so much fun to play, and it's polished and it's well done, because they knew that the other side might be a little bit criticized. Now, I'm all for listening to the community. I think that it's important for a developer to do so, but I also think that it's important not to let the scope of your game creep out of control to the point where once you release the game, it ends up being a wish-mosh mess and there's no real focus. In this game, it's combat, and they did it well. We live in a very unique time as gamers. When I first started playing games, the internet wasn't widely available for developers to use to constantly update their games. So nowadays, to see a developer have a roadmap, have a scope of what they wanted to achieve, be able to use early access and community feedback to further enhance their game and to reach their goal, and to launch it with every one of the features that they said were going to be included in day one, bug-free, polished, and a ton of fun, is very rare, and I appreciate it. And maybe there's a bit of nostalgia in that fact, and why I enjoy playing Stars and Shadows so much is because it reminds me of the time when you threw in a game, you had fun playing it, and you didn't have to worry about the next patch. So those are my abstract thoughts on why I think Stars and Shadows is such a great game. If you want to know more or want to read a really in-depth review, go to eXplorminate.net and check out Chris Sergeant Shaggy Massey's excellent review. Stop by our forums on Steam. There's always a great discussion going on about 4X in general, or specifically Stars and Shadows. And a little shout out to our Patreon supporters, guys. Really appreciate you make it possible for us to make this content for you guys. So this has been Army P for eXplorminate.net. Appreciate you guys spending a little bit of time to hang out with me and my thoughts on Stars and Shadows. Oh yeah, in case you were wondering, there's no frickin' multiplayer.